Welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danille, here with Ken.
What's up? What's up? It's 95 out, and Danille's got a jacket on.
They always keep it so cold in the studio.
I know.
I get in here and it's freezing.
Yeah,
so.
Arizona is still warm.
Yeah, it's really warm
So,
out still.
welcome, everybody. Good topic today.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about Airbnb. But first, before we jump into that.
Okay, all right.
How was your weekend?
Oh, it was good. Yeah, just relaxing finally.
Yeah, it's been like a lot of traveling.
Yeah, I told my sister that you could take a van girl out of Scottsdale, but you can't make her into a van girl. So that's
that was a little clunky.
That was a little clunky, but I was saying like Danille slowly getting back from van life.
Slowly getting back from van life. Life on the road was rough, but I'm happy to be back. But yeah, it was
rough.
It was fun. It was a fun trip, but we both just aren't really van people.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
So anyway, but anyways, Jerry, why don't you pull up the Twitter question of the week so we can hop into that? So Ken, you asked, how do you see the current market conditions impacting the value and demand for single-family homes?
Oh, in your area. Yeah, so that's why we have Jason Hartman on tonight, on our happy hour. I know for those of you who are in the inner circle, this is the topic. We released a short snippet of interview with Jason. So we are seeing a little bit of homes on the market longer.
Yeah, we definitely are.
Now we are seeing some pricing adjustments, but guys, like we're still really, really, really under the listings, the number of listings. In fact, Jason said it's over 50% low. It's about 50% low. So, but I would say if the Fed's coming out Wednesday, I think it is. We'll see if they raise or don't raise, or some people, of course, want cuts, which I don't think is going to happen. But the dot plot comes out today, right? Yeah. So, and the dot plot, of course, is the projections of each of the chairmen. But to answer the question, in our area, we're seeing softness in some spots. I actually seeing it in the really ultra high end homes.
Yeah.
The entry level homes don't seem to be moving or adjusting at all.
I'm seeing a little bit in more the entry level. They're just sitting longer. They're still selling in Scottsdale, but they are sitting for 30, 45 plus days versus selling in,
Well, we just
5.
We just bought something not even a year ago, right? And you told me yesterday it's already moved up $100,000.
Yeah, a little over a year ago. Right. So we bought something for $480 and then something basically identical because they're very cookie cutter homes just sold for $580. So,
yeah. So, so that's why I say the entry levels are still pretty good. But when I'm talking about over a million, which seems to be kind of an average price here now in Scottsdale. Phoenix is obviously different. Mesa and Tempe and Chandler and all those markets are quite different. But where we are, I'm seeing a little bit.
Well, let's see what your Twitter followers said.
Yeah.
Did you pull that back up? So Ben said millennials, or actually, can you go back to response 1? Josh said, context is key. I'm in the Midwest. A well-kept 3-2 in a good school district still gets snapped up if it's priced according to comps. Everything on the left and right of the bell curve is softened.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Yeah, and I agree with that too. My brother and sister-in-law are looking in Ohio, and I'm helping them just kind of look on the MLS, and
it's tough
right.
for them.
Things are getting snapped up there a lot faster than even Phoenix if it's like priced correctly and in a good school district. Yeah,
we're seeing softness in all the spots that a lot of people moved out of.
Yeah. Absolutely. Jerry, if you go to the next one. Ben said millennials want single-family homes even if it's not feasible, so single-family homes will remain in high demand regardless of where. I suspect this personal choice by the collective will continue to jack up single home prices independently of whether they are worth that much.
Yeah, I think the one big thing, and it might be a good YouTube video, is the investors are pretty much gone. So not completely, but I think you got to know that what happened was the traditional market, I'm going way back, was not really an investor single family market. It was a small percentage. And then obviously what really moved the needle were people that actually needed homes and moved into them. Novel concept. Then that changed, and that obviously people were flipping and buying, and I'm not saying the end user wasn't that, but there's a lot of people that got into the real estate rental business in the last 10 years, a lot, and including the big boys, BlackRock and all. They're buying up Invitation Homes and some of these big companies. So with the interest rate increases, I think that you're going to see that market is got to be very negative. But at the end of the day, if you're still looking, like if you and I were moving, we would still go buy a home somewhere.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think that's the point.
Yeah, and I do think that the investors have, slowed down, but I do think people are still investing, because I think whether that's what we recommend or not, people are still investing with negative cash flow just to put their money somewhere.
That's crazy. I don't agree with that at all, but yep, that's true. People are still buying, and that's why this Airbnb topic is going to be a good one.
Yep. Well, and John says, Ken, I agree with you. Investors buying 2 and 3 families in my area and turning them into rentals has stopped.
Yeah.
So, and then Jerry, can you go to the third?
So you think about the stress. Most of the stress is going to be with the investor, not necessarily with the homeowner.
Right. Correct. Craig says demand has softened. Prices are remaining sticky, but it feels like they're slowly coming down as market times have increased, and we are seeing price reductions and seller concessions. The stats don't show this yet. I'd be curious where he's at too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think all that's right. It's very, there's single family is so different. I mean, even in our, where we are, like you go drive any direction, it's going to be a very different market. So we are seeing, some areas that are really getting impacted and others that are not. And some of it's crime. That's another thing.
Yeah.
So people are starting to look at that. I was talking to a friend of mine that moved to Portland, 2 years ago, outside of Portland, actually. And I said, did you ever go in? He's like, no, never. Like, he goes one time. and then what happened was they were working and at a hospital. And they said that the people said, oh, you got to start carrying a gun. He's like, what are you talking about? Anyway, it just created this big thing. Now, I'm not saying, that's a systemic issue, but he moved back. That's the point, So I think people are moving out of those areas, or trying to, maybe move to those areas and moving. So safety's become a problem in a lot of areas, and I think you're going to see that migration still as a result of that. It's just starting to creep up.
Yeah, I agree. So before we jump in the topic today, we're going to be discussing Airbnb. Great topic. But a little bit of things. One, if you could hit the like button, we love that. It helps us out, helps us make content. And then secondly, Ken and I have a happy hour tonight with Jason Hartman for our Inner Circle members. Essentially, this is where you can listen in and ask Jason questions directly. Jason is an expert in the single family home market. So we're going to be discussing, the future of real estate, what he's seeing, areas he's seeing booming, areas he's seeing not. And so if you just go to kenmcrory.com/join now to sign up for the Inner Circle, it is $30 a month.
This is a good one, guys. Jason prides himself on his charts and his analysis of all these individual markets. I think you're going to really, really enjoy this one, especially with some of the questions that we had today. So you're going to want to listen.
Yep, absolutely. So let's jump in to our topic today. So we want to dive into Airbnb, a little bit about what's going on with Airbnb, but also just problems with Airbnb that nobody really talks about. And the reason that I think, Jerry, if you want to take that down real quick, the reason I think that this could be interesting right now is Airbnb was cash flowing very heavily the past few years, which made it a really sound investment for a lot of people, because you could 3 or 4 times your income versus a, regular long-term lease.
And I think you got to go back to the success of it. Airbnb is a phenomenal tool for people.
Mm-hmm.
But
we love it.
We do. We use it all the time. We used it on our trip quite a bit. But I think you got to go back and I would say Airbnb kind of hit its peak in call it 2020, 2021, right before all this inflation hit, and we started seeing these increases in interest rates and rents and stuff like that.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. So, I did a little bit of research on this, and actually the bookings in Airbnb are at an all-time high. There's more people booking per night now than ever before.
I actually do know that.
Yeah, but the inventory is what's increased. So there's been a lot of inventory that's hit the market.
So before we just gloss over that, that's actually what I was kind of alluding to. No different than if it wasn't an Airbnb. People use cheap debt to buy real estate, period. So, and again, we were kind of talking about the difference between a homeowner and an investor. Very different. Very different. A homeowner doesn't really have a short-term mentality and isn't trying to make it into a business. So what happened was, again, in 2019, 2020, 2021, when rates were lower, all those people used that cheap money to buy these. And then there are all these online gurus too. Don't forget about all that. Here's a great way. We had a couple of them on, and they had good, sound business models. So a lot of people entered the game, and that's kind of the point. Is they did it through cheap money, and that's why the numbers are up.
Right, for the inventory.
Supply's up too.
And I also even know people that are just renting out the home they live in and going and staying with family or friends when it's rented in order to subsidize some of these higher mortgages and inflation costs that they're incurring.
And this is a big deal. We had one friend in Scottsdale, and how much were they making? They had one lady in there like 9 months or something.
Yeah, they made like $60,000 and she was only there like 6 months or something, maybe a little more.
Yeah, it was quite a bit, and so they ended up buying a car from it. So a lot of people are testing this, but I think, to your point, there's an inventory problem.
Yeah, there's an inventory problem. And so because of that, the amount that they're rented is way down. So before, all of these extra things that we're going to talk about today was still worth it because you were making like 3 or 4 times what you can make on a long-term rental. But I think what people are seeing now is maybe you're making double what you would make on a long-term rental, but maybe that's an extra $1,500 a month, an extra $2,000 a month. And the question is it worth all of the work to try to make an extra $1,000? Because you, as we're going to go over, have a lot more work with an Airbnb than you do a long-term rental.
A lot more. Yeah. And I guess that's kind of the point. We just rented one for next summer, and I paid $8,500 for 30 days for this home. And I went on to Zillow and I found it, and the average mortgage payment was $8,400.
Wow.
That's of course with a down payment. Now it doesn't mean that they financed it. They might have paid all cash, but the point is, that's what interest rates do right now. That's what they drive these payments up so much. And if any of these folks are on a floater, they're in big trouble. That's the other piece.
Right, exactly. Like if they're on a floater, or if they're not on a floater, but they were making, $6,000 a month, and now they're making $3,000.
Right. And I was looking before our live today. There's also, I know we're going to get to this, but the cities are starting to crack down.
There, we're going to get to this.
Yes,
Ken always likes to jump ahead.
Well, that's part of the problem. And then in addition to that, we're going to Europe in a month, and I found an article on Mirror, which is a UK. This is everything from like UK, France, Italy, that the hotel prices are actually less than the Airbnbs now.
Yeah,
in many areas.
We're gonna get into all of these things.
Okay, I'm jumping ahead as always.
So let's start with the number one thing about Airbnb. So it's not passive income, right? So when you have a long-term tenant, It's not fully passive income either, but it is pretty darn close in most ways. You know, my tenants might contact me once every 2 months about something. And it's usually I just send a maintenance person out and it's fixed. When it comes to Airbnbs, you have maid service, you have maintenance, you have tenant issues, you have neighbors being upset at you issues. There's a lot of hassle getting people checked in and getting people checked out.
Well, Danille does a little bit of this, and I remember that you showed me your phone. How many messages came in an evening?
Right. Yeah. So I work with a company that does do like midterm rentals, and we get texts all night, all day, all the time. Just with, I can't get in. I lost my keys. You know, the dishwasher's not working right. You know, all of these things, right? The one girl, the latest is a girl's upset because she can't use the neighboring apartment complex's gym because she doesn't like our gym. She wants the neighboring complex's gym and she's not allowed to use it. So she's fired up. So you just deal with constant personalities and things.
So it's a business. People moving in, people moving out.
Full business.
That's all. You just got to know. It's so is rentals. So are rentals. That's true. But this is, you know, when you're doing nightlies, you know, 2-3 minimums, it's tough.
Absolutely. And the thing is, too, it's to scale. Like the company that I work with, they have like 60 some Airbnbs, right? So it all scales. But if you only have 2 or 3, you're not getting that scaling benefit. Yeah. So you're just dealing with all of these things.
But
right?
I don't just want to, you know, rain on the Airbnb parade. In the right market, with the right purchase and the right rent, I'm sure there's plenty of people killing it, right?
There are, but I do think even the people killing it right now, because I'm on a lot of different groups on Facebook and things for this, everybody is way down. Whether they're way down and still killing it because they have such a low price, or whether they're not killing it and they're kind of desperate. And the other thing about Airbnb too is like you're really relying on that platform, you know? So if they decide you're not going to be on the first page, you're going to be on the 8th page, that's going to really affect your business. And it's kind of like Google in the way you don't really know why, you know, and if somebody leaves you a bad review, it hurts what page you're on and all of these things. So it's, that is a whole nother issue in itself,
that
know?
Is. I never thought about that.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. It's just like anything. How do you get up higher so that you get booked? Because I don't know about you guys, but I've never gone through the second page. I've gotten the second page, but never to the third.
Right.
There's always plenty on the map around. But I think inventory is a big deal. And I think you're going to start to see, Kiyosaki went on some show recently, and I saw it was, you know, as a result of the New York restrictions, and says that he believes it's going to tip the housing market. I don't think that's true, actually. But it is you're going to start to see this inventory start to come back. We're starting to see it just in our markets, the ones we look at. We're starting to see these beautiful, I mean, these houses are fully beautiful, you know, staged, you know, with all furnished. And they're starting to hit the market.
Well, you know how to tell if they're an Airbnb, right?
Tell, right?
They have bunk beds. Airbnbs always have bunk beds, and nobody else really has bunk
Good
beds.
Good point. Oh,
so if you see a
tip.
nice house with bunk beds, it's an Airbnb.
It's an Airbnb, yeah. Yep.
But the second thing that people don't account on Airbnb is a lot of extra maintenance. People are going to tear up your home. It's not their home. They're going to have more people than they say that they're going to have coming in. And you're going to need maintenance people to fix all this. And actually, Daniel said that he had an Airbnb tenant flood their home and create $53,000 worth of damage that he's not sure the insurance company is going to cover because it's an Airbnb.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually another one, Daniel. Thanks for saying that. I think a lot of you might be renting these Airbnbs with traditional insurance. You got to be careful with that.
You have to be very careful. They don't cover that. You need tenant insurance, and even beyond that, you need short-term stay insurance. So make sure you have it. It's expensive, but it's worth the money. So the third thing that Ken was about to touch on before I cut him off is that several areas are passing zoning prohibiting Airbnb.
Yeah. Now this is really making news. This kind of started a while ago. We did a podcast on this about a year plus ago, And we started to see it creeping up because people were just upset in general about living next door to one. And so the towns and the counties were passing these little laws here and there. But now they're really starting. This is really taking some momentum.
Yeah, and the thing is that people kind of dismiss these because cities have not been enforcing them. So I know, like in Scottsdale, you have to get a license for your Airbnb. There's so many people that don't have a license. I think I read like 20% of people actually even have a license. However, they're starting to enforce these. So New York City has banned Airbnb since 2016. They've done nothing about it.
Yeah.
But now they are. So starting at the end, I think it's December 1, any reservation after that, you can't honor it as an Airbnb, period, unless you live in the home. So I know people are going to try to skirt this law, and it's going to be interesting to see how New York enforces that. But if they're able to figure out a way to enforce that, it's going to be dodgy. You're going to have to figure that out.
Well, that'll be the next thing, though. And it'll start to go through. People will start to look at this as a potential revenue maker with cities.
Yeah, absolutely. All they have to do, right, with fines. And the fines can be a lot. Like I know in California, there's certain cities, smaller cities that do enforce it. And they charge like $1,000 and then $10,000 fines. And homeowners don't want to mess with that.
Just think, I know this is a dirty word, guys, but just think HOA.
Yeah, exactly.
All right? The HOAs, I don't know. I was laughing the other day. We have that young kid come over and wash our cars, and he's like, "Oh, the HOA is all over me," and he's like, "All they do is walk the property and with a notepad." And then they issue fines, and I think you're going to start to see more of that. The issue is staffing. And but it's low hanging fruit. Scottsdale, 80% of the people don't have licenses. If they just had one or two people to monitor that and start issuing fines, it would be a big deal.
They don't even need people to monitor it. They just need a 1-800 number that neighbors can call.
That's true.
And they will be fine on getting all of that taken care of. Because people hate living next door to an Airbnb.
Yeah, this is a big deal.
Now, I will say something. So Vegas just did something really interesting. They banned Airbnb, except for they issued, I think it was 2,300 licenses.
Yeah, I saw that.
So they did a lottery, right? So those are going to be worth gold one day, because once the bans really do start taking place and you hold a license and there's only 2,300 of you in the whole entire community, that's going to be great. So Scottsdale actually proposed doing the same thing next year. It's on, I don't want to call it the ballot, but the board is considering doing that. So for those of you that are in the area, that is something you might want to get on, because it's a random lottery. But if you can get one of those on one of your properties and you get grandfathered in, that can make your property worth a lot of money.
Well, you got one, right?
I have a license, but if they end up doing a lottery and basically taking all the current licenses and doing a lottery, then the people that win the lottery will be doing really well if and when they ever do enforce it, and those licenses are the only ones allowed to do it.
Right. This is the same thing that happened with marijuana. Like, those licenses went up in value. So this is going to be one of those things. I have family that's commercial fishermen in Alaska. Those licenses, there's only a limited number, went up in value if you look at the 20-year history of a license to be able to fish up there now. So that's going to be a thing. So you heard it from us first.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would jump on that. If you got a Vegas license, make sure you comment underneath. We'd love to bring you on and chat about that and how that works and what that looks like.
Especially Vegas. I mean, we're going up for the F1. We're going up for the F1 race. And you can't imagine what they jack these hotels. We're staying at the Aria, I think it is, and it's nuts what they're getting in thousands and thousands a night. So a Vegas license would be gold.
Well, and it actually is a win-win, when they do this auction license, because the hotels hate Airbnb because they need to make money too. people really like it, like me and you like to use it. And there's a housing shortage that Airbnb is contributing to in some way. So now they're kind of like offering it, but limiting it. And then, it's like a win-win for
nice
everyone.
Compromise. Yeah, it's a nice compromise. We like it because we like to bring our dogs, and
I like a kitchen.
We like a pool and a kitchen, and we sometimes even travel with friends, and you just got your own space. So you don't always have that in a hotel. So it's going to be interesting to see. But the point here is you're going to start to see more and more of these cities figure out the right way to roll out the restrictions, and then also the policies, and then the enforcement of them.
Yep, exactly. So the fourth thing about Airbnb that you need to know are people are getting turned off by Airbnb in general. So this is something that you're starting to hear a little bit about. You kind of hinted towards it with the hotels. So Airbnb typically is cheaper per night, but because hosts are starting to make less money, they're also starting to up their fees. And when you start to add in fees, it can be more expensive than even staying in a hotel. And we stayed on a lot of Airbnbs during our trip, which was interesting to see how they all are so different.
Hey, we have a pro tip here.
What?
Danille found it. This is actually a really, really good idea. We started looking for Airbnbs next to Whole Foods.
Oh, yeah. That means they're in a nice area.
Yeah, because, like you think about it, it's so simple when you think about it, but a Whole Foods, for example, is going to be in a really nice area, more affluent because it's expensive. And so that actually worked for us.
Yeah, because we were afraid we were going to end up in a bad area because it's hard to know if you don't know a city. So that actually really worked well. But the thing with the cleaning fees that were cracking me up is we had to pay a cleaning fee, and sometimes it was expensive, but then we also had to strip the beds and take the trash out and take all our food and throw it away. And we basically had to clean the house, minus no one had us mop the floor, but minus that, we had to do just about everything and pay a cleaning fee. So my point with that is that people are getting a little bit turned off by that, and some people are opting to just stay in a hotel.
The fees are expensive. Yeah. The service fees and the cleaning fees. I mean, obviously, if you're just doing 1 or 2 nights, it's not making any sense, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the thing. You don't have to pay when we went to that. I can't remember where we were at. So we went to Vegas, and we had that. I think it was Inspirato, where we had, remember the big suite up top with four masters? That was fine. So I think hotels are starting to figure that out, right? Because they had the kitchen, had the main room, and they had 4 basically masters. And so I think you're going to start to see more and more of that.
Absolutely. And so number 5 is, simple supply and demand. And we already kind of touched on this. There's actually 50% more supply than before COVID started.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big number. How many?
I don't know how many total, but I just do know that it's 50% more was added. And then in the last year and a half, it's been 25% more.
So you're saying that Airbnb, their supply went up 50% in 3 years?
Yes.
That's a big number.
Yep. And in Phoenix, it's actually 4 times the number that it was from 2017 to 2023. So it's really the supply issue. And that's actually part of the issue with Airbnb and being in that kind of business is, there's no cap on supply. Anybody can get in. Anybody can do it. You can even Airbnb your own place. It's tough. It's a tough business model on the supply side because you can't really control that.
Yeah. We haven't even touched on the HOA component, right? Remember that HOA jumped all over your tenant? It was a long-term tenant, but they went and knocked on the door to make sure.
Oh, yeah. Don't ever try to do Airbnb if your HOA doesn't allow it because they are. You guys, people hate Airbnb. I get it, right? Depending on how the Airbnb owner runs their place and how strict they are on parties and all these things. But, if you're having an Airbnb and you're having people with parties every weekend, you're going to hate living next door to that. So your neighborhood's going to know. They're going to be all over it. I mean, maybe if you're very selective and you only rent to couples that are aren't going to be having parties and things like that, but you're definitely going to be a target either way. So if your HOA doesn't allow it, you really just can't even do it. I wouldn't even try.
Yeah, I would be careful. That's another one.
Right. So we're going to get to our questions from our inner circle. Make sure those listening, if you have questions, feel free to ask them. I'll try to get to some of them. We have our happy hour tonight with Jason Hartman. For those that are members, you just go to kenmcrory.com/join now and hit the like button while you're at it because it helps us. So Brandon is asking, they have a new 200 plus unit development nearing completion just down the road from our properties. And they just opened up their application website with a full listing of what they're seeking per unit. We know our rents are a bit below market, but upon seeing what this new development is asking, we're not just below, but close to 40% below. Ours is an older building, but we have more amenities.
Oh.
How would you approach raising rents to a competitive level again?
So this is a really good spot you're in, number one. The worst thing you could do is raise your rents right now. So because think about it, this person has 200 units to rent. Okay. That's going to be about a year for them to absorb all that. Plus whatever there's on their website may be higher or might be lower even from what is there today. So you got to start with something on a new development. I've done this so many times. I've been in both positions many, many times. So if I have a 200 unit building that's not renting, the very first thing that I'm going to do is just do half off the first month, or let's say one month off of on a 12-month lease. So you're basically discounting the rent over 12 months. So you're giving a month free on a 12-month free rent, a month free on a 12-month lease. That's basically, let's say it's $1,500. That's a fair amount of money. So you have to take a look at all of that, and you got to make sure that you're not competing with the lease up in that 200 unit. And so that's what I would do, is just hold tight. If you're cash flowing, just hold tight, because you're always going to be that in that spot. And then when that property stabilizes, or they've run out of a certain kind of a unit, like a 1 or 2 or 3 bedroom, then that's when you start to raise that particular unit type. So you got to monitor all this stuff, but I wouldn't try to compete with them right now, because I would fear the potential for a discount on a new renter. Usually, again, imagine you might have 10 or 20 vacants. They have 200. So they have 200 vacants to fill. That's the issue. Let them stabilize, and then it sounds to me, don't do anything. Don't refinance or sell or anything until this person's stabilized, and then you're gonna get sucked right up. It's gonna be great. In about 18 months to 2 years, you're gonna see a big difference in revenue at your property. But I would not try to do it right now.
Yeah, that's a really good advice. It's kind of nice. It's almost like you have right next to you a guide, right, of like what you could charge in rent once they get it stabilized.
Yeah. The market maker, right? Let them set the market. Just because it's on their website doesn't mean much. Trust me, I've done this. We're doing this. When you have 300 units or 200 units vacant, you've got stress. They're vacant, unrented. So you're going to do anything you can to fill that with good tenants. So just wait it out.
Yep, absolutely. This is funny. Jamie's asking, if an Airbnb is banned by a city, can that be enforced?
You know what that means?
Well, if a city bans Airbnb, can it be enforced?
I think so. Yeah, it looks like they're doing it. They're going to start. I haven't really heard a lot of fines, though. Have you?
I have in California.
Okay.
But that's the only one that I've really heard. I'm really interested to see for New York City, because New York City is such a massive city. So they clearly, I would think, you never know, but I would think they have some sort of plan. If now they're saying, listen, we're going to start enforcing, you can't do an Airbnb. I can't imagine they're doing that and just going to not do anything again.
You're right. Yeah. And by the way, New York's was 2016. So that's when they rolled all this out. They just did it. They didn't really enforce it.
Well, they actually had, so Airbnb sued them in 2016, and Airbnb agreed to drop the lawsuit because New York City said, we're not enforcing this. So they blatantly said, we're not going to enforce it. We're just have it. I don't understand why. But now they're going to enforce it. So now I don't know if Airbnb is picking up that lawsuit or not. I need to look into that. But it definitely that is the way it happened. So
Well, time will tell. Be careful. But yes, I would say they definitely can enforce.
They can enforce just about anything. Josh is asking, if you do Airbnb over a regular rental, how much more business do you need to do to make it worth it? It's a good question.
It is a good question.
Gosh, I would say I would want, if I was going to do all the work for an Airbnb, I'd want to make at least 3 times what I was making.
At least. I was going to say
after
that's
all
the
said and
minimum.
done. Yeah,
That's
after all
the
said
minimum.
and done. Not.
Yeah, so if you're, that might not even be enough. You got to look at what your time's worth. So if a regular rental nets you $500 a month, I don't know if that's the right number or not. Let's just say it is. What is all that extra time worth for you? For me, I need to make 10 times. I really do. I just, there's no way I would be dealing with tenants and stuff like in between rentals and all that crap.
Well, you could get a property management company to do it.
That's true.
But you still want to be, but even with that, I would want to be making 3 times just because of the damage. It's just going to be more damage and more headache that gets escalated to you in some kind of regard.
That's a good question, though. Really good. I would say, three times is probably a good number.
Well, and it depends what you're making too. I mean, if you're making $4,000 a month on your regular rental, and then maybe it's only double because maybe you'd be fine with another 4. But if you're making $500 a month on your rental, you're probably going to want to make a few $1,000s in order to make Airbnb worth it.
I know, because remember, one's fully furnished and with all the amenities and short term.
Yep.
And there's a lot more expenses. So.
Absolutely. So Henry from YouTube is asking, I know it's not easy, but do you know of any commercial buildings that have been converted to apartments?
I've seen some that have tried and not successfully. So mostly I've seen like old warehouses, but not necessarily commercial office buildings. So I've seen that. Never seen them deliver them on budget ever, actually. You think about these commercial office, who wants to live in that? Like, there's no common area. It's not set up for the plumbing and the bathrooms, and there's just so many things. Apartments, multifamily is built with huge amenity packages and balconies where you can go outside and all that stuff. So most office buildings don't have that. So what I've seen kind of the retro, like we saw that in Tennessee, Franklin, Tennessee, at that one place. I can't remember the name of it. It was super cool, where they had taken an old factory. It was like
called the factory.
Yeah, it was called the factory, and they had converted it into some retail, and I think they had a multifamily component to it as well. So I've seen that happen, and but not successfully yet. I actually think that these are going to have to be ripped down.
I was going to say, do you think it would be cheaper and easier almost to just rip it down and rebuild it? Because if you're trying to install, imagine that you have a 6-story office building. You have to put plumbing and showers and toilets and run it all the way down. That seems to me like it's going to be so much work.
It is. It's different, guys. I mean, if you fast forward and just go look at let's say Miami, and they build these big condo towers. First of all, most of them are rentals because the expense of building something like that, you have to sell them, and they're $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever. A high-rise rental doesn't even pencil. It's just it's really, really, really going to be hard to convert.
Yeah. So Soleil from the Inner Circle is asking, if I have a house and I want to refinance to get some equity, cash out refinance, is that going to change the interest rate on my loan?
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes. You want to be careful, especially now. You might not want to do that, actually.
Yeah, you probably don't want to do that. If you're going to do that, assuming that you're in a very low interest loan, you could look into a home equity loan option. It's going to be more expensive, higher interest rate, but you could only be taking out a portion of that versus your whole loan.
And then you should look at the reason you might need equity. Also, is it if it's because you're having a tough time keeping the home, then that might be a short-term option, not a good one. But that's a different issue. If it's just to go find something or buy something, You might want to take a look at that. You basically got to look at the cost of the new loan.
Yeah, which is expensive right now.
The old loan's an asset. If you have a fixed rate loan right now, let's say in the 3 range, it's an asset for you. You just got to look at it as an asset.
Absolutely. So Suyash is asking, can I rent my place by the room if I only have 2 bedrooms in it?
Of course.
Yeah, you can. You have to make sure that pencils out, though, because you can, but it's going to be a tight space for 2 people that don't know each other, and you just have to make sure that it pencils.
Yeah, you can. My sister did this pretty successfully, and it's actually, again, it's more like a business where each room has to be locked off, and there's common area rules for things like parking and the restrooms or the bathrooms, I guess, and then kitchens and that kind of stuff, all the common area, So it does. There are plenty of people that do it. Actually, my sister did very well doing this. Renting these by the room.
But it's got to make sense. Like your sister will do it on houses that have 4 or 5, 6 bedrooms. If you're going to be renting 2 rooms versus 1, you're going to want, once again, to be making more money than if you're just renting it out to somebody, because it's going to be more work. The one benefit that it has, so right now I have 3 people renting a 2-bedroom from me. It's not by the room. They just all 3 went in on it, but it's $1,800. So they're each paying $600. So that does give me a little bit of security and the fact that they'll be able to pay, because there's 3 of them versus, 1 person responsible for the whole mortgage. The mortgage is less. So if they lose their job, it'll be easier for them to keep up. So there are benefits to having multiple people, renting versus 1. But you just got to make it worth it.
And I actually disagree with that philosophy completely.
Right.
So, because I had a whole I had a student property in Flagstaff, Arizona, where there would be up to, 4 people in a 2-bedroom, 4 students, let's say. And, the last thing you want is 4 people to pay you rent on a unit. And, because invariably somebody doesn't pay, or they move out, or they dropped out of school, or whatever. And so then the other 3 pay, and they're like, wow, so-and-so moved out, and then you're in all these kind of disputes. You have to have one, in my opinion, you have to have one person that does this. The roommate thing is tough. And I think you should have one person on the lease that's responsible for the whole lease. Now, this is a little bit different. My sister did the lock off, where she actually ran credit on each person, and was pretty strict on who could be in there, and she had a lease with each one. But she was always managing vacancies inside of that house. So you just got to look at whether or not you want to collect rent from multiple people.
Yeah, and let me be clear. I'm only collecting rent from 1 person, but I'm saying all 3 of them are paying the rent to the person. So it just makes it easier.
That's different. Yeah. Then you don't want to have to chase people.
Right. Brandon is asking from the inner circle, at what point do you consider or take legal action over damages found at a property after an eviction in excess of the security deposit against the former tenants?
Oh, yeah. So here's the thing. There's each state is a little bit different. Landlord-tenant laws are a little bit different. So you have a certain prescribed period where you actually have to give the tenant a full accounting of their move out. So that's on you. That's on the landlord. It's super black and white. So in Arizona, it's 14 days. So let's say Danille moves out of one of my rentals. I go in, I do a full assessment. That could be $50 or it could be $5,000. It doesn't really matter, but all that stuff gets wrapped up. I always suggest you take a lot of photos, and also that's the whole point of a move-in, move-out inspection form. So if you haven't had a move-in inspection form, then that could be a strike against you, not necessarily, but you should have that says that everything is in good shape when they moved in. then you can prove that it wasn't when they moved out. Then what we do is we immediately send a demand letter to them for the overage, whatever that is. So, and then they're going to probably refute it, and then you have two options. You can send them to collections, or you can go to small claims. That's traditionally how it works.
Yep, exactly. And, just make sure you're getting a big enough security deposit to cover most things, because it is hard to get money from them after the fact, especially if it's an eviction, because they already have the eviction on their record. So the chance of them carrying, if they have a credit, or a collections on their record, is probably low.
And this is one more lesson for property management. Danille can speak to this, but she requires a 60-day notice, and I know this is an eviction, so it's a little different. But you as the landlord can go into that unit with, again, under landlord law, I think most cases it's 24 to 48 hours. You can give them notice and say you're going to, that you're requiring permission to enter. And you can go do an assessment before they leave. So that's super helpful. So a lot of times we'll go into places before somebody moves out, and you can address all that stuff while they're still in the lease with you. So I'm not saying the outcome will change, but the point is that you can definitely find out a lot of stuff before people move.
Yeah, so right, exactly. And I like that I have the 60-day notice. I know this is an eviction. It's not the same thing. But I go in with my handyman, I make notes, I kind of have them start fixing the unit before they move out, and I get it rented usually before they move out, so that, I have that 60-day buffer no matter what, which really helps me with figuring out the cost of all these things. And I did make the mistake one time. The tenant asked me if they could apply their security deposit to the last month's rent. No, I said yes.
Bad mistake.
So essentially it didn't cost me too much money, but essentially what happened was, one of the tenant's boyfriends had come over and put a hole in the wall, and they had patched it up. And this was after I did the inspection, the first time, fixed all the little things that were broke. And so I had to pay about a couple $100 to $300 to get the wall fixed, because they fixed it, but not to the level you would want it fixed. But that was my lesson, because I didn't have any money. I wasn't going to go after her for $300. It wouldn't have been worth it. So I just let it go, and I chalked it up to a lesson learned. But yeah, don't ever let them apply the last month's rent from the security deposit.
Yeah, and by the way, when somebody decides they don't want to pay rent, or you're evicting them for some reason, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't mean that you can't inspect the unit. It doesn't mean it's your property. You can go in and with proper notice, and go do an inspection. And I tell you, pictures. You make sure that you take a lot of photos. Yeah, I've seen all kinds of stuff, guys. I mean, we had one in Chandler, Arizona, where we had to evict somebody for non-payment, and the unit next door was vacant. So they kicked a hole through the drywall, moved into the unit next door. So when they moved forward with evicting the unit, they were vacant, but they were in the unit next door now squatting. So there's all kinds of stuff.
You always have the best stories. You should write another book just on that.
Guys, stories. I've seen so much stuff.
Stories from the road.
Oh my gosh. So much stuff.
Sure.
I actually should do that. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories like that. So they could get very creative. So I'm sorry you have these damages, but there are also some insurance companies where I think it's called Sure Deposit, I believe. Go just look that up, where you can actually have the tenant pay a smaller amount, and then they it's like an insurance policy on top of the deposit. So there are some products out there for that too. So it's like It's not necessarily renter's insurance because that's if something happens. This is actually something around move out. So take a look at that. I know there's different companies popping up for that. That might save you some money in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah. John says he had to do the same thing. He had a tenant, same with mine, in a bind, really couldn't make the last month's rent payment, said just use it. And he had to do some minor repairs too. So, you have, but the good news is you got the last month's rent, even if it was a security deposit form. So I guess it could have been worse. So
Yeah.
Florian says Tales from would be a great book.
Yeah. That's I probably should do something like that.
You should do something like
fun.
that.
I tell you what, I just laugh now. I mean,
my favorite one, I think, is when you had that family that was cooking in the floor.
Oh, yeah. That was crazy. I'll tell you guys real quick what happened. So this was in Kennewick, Washington, of all places. And we had a family that was not from the U.S., and they were not used to a kitchen. And they qualified, too, by the way. So we went into the unit, and they had cut a hole. Thankfully, it was the first floor. They cut a hole through the floor, through the carpet. And there was they had taken the oven racks, and they were grilling in the floor. They had briquettes and wood cooking. They were cooking on an open the floor, and there was all this grease on the outside of the hole. And I couldn't believe it. That's the first time I'd seen that. And I was like, well, okay. I never thought you would have to explain how to use an oven or, the kitchen or a stove.
I wonder if that's a fire hazard.
Oh, my God.
So
can you imagine that?
No.
That was before smoke, what are they called?
Sprinklers.
Sprinklers, yeah. Fire sprinklers. Clearly. So.
Awesome. Well, we'll end with that. You guys have a good week. We'll see you tonight if you're part of the Inner Circle. We are going to be with Jason Hartman live at 5 Arizona time. And everybody else, we'll see you next Monday.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.